I've filmed in dozens of derelict places for my Urbex channel, Faded Fun Lens. You get used to shadows playing tricks, your mind filling in the blanks in the dark. It's part of the job, part of the thrill, even. But what happened at Captain Lafo's Fun Fortress in the old, long-shuttered seaside pleasure park? That wasn't just shadows. In that maze of cracked mirrors and decaying props, I'm pretty sure the tricks were being played on me by something very real, very human, and it definitely wasn't trying to be funny. Seaside Pleasure Park, right out on that rickety old pier, had been a local icon before a couple of bad hurricanes, and just plain neglect finally did it in, maybe 25 years ago. Most of the rides were just rusted skeletons picked clean by the salt air. But Captain Lafo's Fun Fortress, this huge, garishly painted building shaped like some kind of nightmare jester's castle, still stood there, looking almost defiant. It was high on my list. Found a busted service door around the back, hidden by some wild, thorny bushes. The groan of rusty hinges as I pushed it open sounded like the place itself was sighing. "Alright, folks," I whispered into my camera mic, headlamp on. We're stepping into Captain Lafo's. Let's see if the captain is still in, and if he's in a welcoming mood. The air inside was thick, a strange mix of mildew, rotting wood, peeling paint, and this faint, almost sickly sweet smell, like stale cotton candy or ancient bubblegum that had somehow soaked into the very walls. The entrance hall was a disaster. Debris littered the warped floorboards. Faded murals of disturbingly cheerful, yet undeniably creepy. Clowns leered from the walls. A ticket booth with its window smashed in. Classic funhouse entrance designed to unsettle you from the get-go. The first section was a mirror maze, or what was left of it. Dozens of tall panels of dusty, grimy glass, most of them cracked, some completely shattered, reflecting my light in 1,000 confusing, distorted slivers. It was incredibly disorienting, even more so than when these places are operational. My own reflection kept jumping out at me from unexpected angles, warped and monstrous by the uneven, damaged glass. It took me a good 10 minutes just to navigate that initial section, constantly second-guessing which way was forward, occasionally bumping into a mirrored panel I thought was an opening. My camera was probably capturing some great lost and confused footage. That's where I first saw it, or at least thought I saw it, as I was turning a particularly tight corner, catching a glimpse of my own stretched out funhouse mirror reflection in a grimy panel. I saw another shape in the glass. Just for a split second, it seemed to be behind me in the reflection, or maybe off to one side, taller than me, darker. And it was gone before I could really focus on it, before my brain could properly process what it was. "Whoa," I muttered, spinning around fast, flashlight beam stabbing into the mirrored corridor behind me. Nothing. Just my own multiple, misshapen reflections staring back, looking just as startled as I felt. "Okay," I said to the camera, trying to keep my voice light. "This place is already living up to its name. Classic funhouse tricks, even when it's falling apart and probably full of spiders." I pushed on, deeper into the funhouse, into a section with those uneven, tilting floors that are designed to try and throw you off balance. They were mostly seized solid now, just awkwardly angled, making walking a real pain. Then into a long, dark passage where things were clearly supposed to jump out at you from hidden alcoves. But now it was just empty, shadowed recesses and gangling, rotten electrical wires. But I couldn't shake the feeling of that other reflection I glimpsed. Had it been real? Or just a trick of the multiple mirrors, my own shadow being thrown around in a weird way by my headlamp? My tired eyes playing up in the dim, flickering emergency lights that still somehow had a bit of juice. It was easy to rationalize, for a while. Then I found a small, almost hidden alcove tucked away behind a torn piece of canvas that might have once been part of a painted backdrop. This alcove was definitely not part of the original ride design. Someone had been using this space. Recently, there was a dirty, flattened sleeping bag, a couple of empty plastic water bottles, and some fresh-looking candy bar wrappers. And on the wall, someone had scrawled a crude symbol in what looked like charcoal from a burnt piece of wood, a circle with a spidery X-like shape inside it. It looked vaguely familiar, but I couldn't quite place it. Definitely not something the park designers put there. Finding signs of recent habitation, that ratcheted up the tension immediately. "Looks like we're not the first visitors in a while, folks," I said quietly, filming the alcove. Or maybe the current resident is still around and just stepped out for a bit. The thought was not comforting. I wasn't just exploring a derelict ruin anymore. I was trespassing in someone's makeshift, hidden home. The crime aspect here wasn't some grand conspiracy, just the unsettling reality that desperate people find desperate places to hide, and they might not appreciate being filmed. That's when the funhouse started to feel less like a decaying ride and more like a hunting ground. The feeling of being watched intensified dramatically, and I started seeing those fleeting glimpses more often. In a piece of broken mirror lying on the floor, a dark shape seemed to pass by a gap in the wall behind me. When I turned, flashlight beam ready, nothing. In a room with those wavy, distorting mirrors that make you look like a cartoon character, I saw a tall, thin figure reflected as if standing in the doorway I'd just come through, watching me. Spun around, empty doorway. It was always just out of direct sight, always in the reflections. Always gone when I tried to look for real. Was it the squatter, hiding from me, following me through the maze of the funhouse? But why? Why not just confront me? Tell me to get out of their spot. This felt different. This felt playful. In a really disturbing, almost predatory, cat and mouse kind of way. The funhouse layout, designed to confuse and disorient, now felt actively hostile, like it was working with whatever was stalking me, helping it stay hidden. I decided I needed to get out of there. This wasn't fun urbex anymore. This was genuinely unnerving and potentially dangerous. I started trying to find my way back towards the entrance, but the maze of mirrors and dark passages seemed to shift and change around me. Or maybe it was just my rising panic making me lose my sense of direction. How long had I been in here? Then I entered a larger circular room near what I hoped was the exit. The walls were lined with dozens of those tall, distorting funhouse mirrors, and in every single one reflected from a dozen different angles, I saw him. Or the tall, thin, dark figure. It was definitely not my reflection. It was standing in the very center of the room, the spot where I should have been reflected most clearly from all angles. But it wasn't me, it was just standing there, motionless. Its features, if it had any, were completely lost in the dim light and the constant warping of the old glass. But it felt like all those dozens of reflected eyes were fixed directly on me. I didn't scream, couldn't. My breath just hitched in my throat, caught somewhere between a gasp and a choke. Was it real? Was there actually a figure standing there in the center of the room with me? Somehow not visible directly, but only in the mirrors. Or was this some insane, terrifying optical illusion? A final grand trick of the multiple mirrors in my own terrified, exhausted mind. And then all the reflections of the figure, all at once, slowly, deliberately, tilted their heads to the side. As if curious, or maybe hungry. That broke the spell. Pure animal panic took over. I turned and ran, blindly, slammed hard into a mirrored wall I thought was an exit passage. Recoiled, pain shooting up my arm, scrambled another way, heart pounding in my ears, heard a soft dry chuckle seemed to echo through the mirrored room behind me. Or did I? It was so faint, so ambiguous, lost in the sound of my own frantic escape. Finally, I found the real corridor that led back to the entrance hall. Burst out of the mirror maze, back into the slightly more open, though still incredibly creepy, main area, the funhouse. Didn't stop. Ran for that busted service door I'd come in through. Scrambled out into the cool night air, back onto the derelict, windswept pier, heart pounding, gasping for breath. The immediate escape from the funhouse, from those watching reflections, that was the resolution. I was out, safe from whatever was in there. But the terror of that place, it lingered. Who, or what, was in that funhouse with me? Was it the squatter, playing a very sick, very elaborate game? Was it just the building itself, the mirrors, the shadows, combined with my own fear, creating a phantom stalker? I reviewed my footage later, over and over. My camera work was shaky. Naturally, lots of my own panicked breathing. But in the mirror maze, just before I ran out of that circular room, there are a few frames where if you look very closely at the distorted reflections, you can see something that isn't me. Dark, tall, indistinct, but definitely there. And it sure as hell wasn't smiling. It makes you think. Funhouses are meant to distort reality for a cheap thrill. But what happens when a place like that is left to rot in the dark for decades? Maybe sometimes distortions take on a life of their own. Or maybe they just provide the perfect, confusing stage for something very real and very human to play its own terrifying games in the shadows. Either way, I'm staying out of those places for a good long while. Some fun just isn't worth the price of admission. The old Seaview Ferris wheel. It's a rusted skeleton against the sky, a landmark you can spot for miles along that desolate stretch of coast. Locals have all sorts of stories about it, mostly just spooky tales to tell tourists, I guess. But one rumor I heard, the one that really got me interested for my urbex channel, Coastal Rust, was that if you climbed it at just the right time on a clear day, you could see the outline of a shipwreck that only appears at super low tide. So I figured, why not try? Get some sunset shots, maybe solve a local mystery. I definitely wasn't counting on finding someone already occupying the best seat in the house and them not being too keen on company. Getting onto the old Seaview Fun Pier was an adventure in itself. The main walkway from the shore, gone, collapsed into the churning gray Atlantic years ago. So it meant using my trusty inflatable kayak, paddling around from a little hidden cove about a mile down, and then finding these old, sketchy-looking service ladders on one of the main support pylons. It was a bit dicey, especially with my camera gear, but the thought of getting unique footage of Seaview, a place not many explorers managed to get to, was too good to pass up. Finally hauled myself and my pack up onto the creaking, salt-encrusted wooden decking. "Alright, explorers," I said, a little breathless, into my camera mic, the wind already trying to snatch the words away. "We are on the legendary Seaview Fun Pier. This place is seriously remote, seriously battered by the ocean. Let's see what secrets it's holding on to after all these years." The pier was a complete wreck, but in that beautiful, tragic way that makes for great urbex footage. Most of the old game stalls and food shacks were just splintered, gray wood and twisted, rusted metal. The tracks of the Sea Serpent roller coaster, what was left of them, were buckled and eaten through with rust. But the Ferris wheel, man, despite its own heavy coat of rust and grime, it stood surprisingly proud right at the far end of the pier, the part that jutted out furthest over the turbulent ocean. It was massive. The passenger gondolas, their original bright paint now faded to pastel ghosts, swayed gently, almost eerily, in the constant sea breeze. Their metal frames groaning and creaking like old bones. I spent a good couple of hours filming the general decay, the way the sea was slowly, relentlessly grinding the pier down. It was incredibly atmospheric. As the afternoon light started to fade, the sun beginning its slow dip towards the stormy-looking horizon, I found myself drawn back to that Ferris wheel. It was just so dominant, so iconic. I was filming its massive, rusted base, the huge gears and drive mechanism now seized solid with rust, when I just idly panned my camera upwards. Along the giant spokes toward the gondolas silhouetted against the pale, overcast sky, and that's when I saw it. A shape, a definite silhouette. In the highest gondola, the one stopped right at the very top, the 12 o'clock position, perfectly outlined against the sky. It looked like a person sitting upright, completely motionless, just sitting there as if enjoying the view. My first thought, honestly, was, is that another explorer? Did they beat me to it? This pier was incredibly hard to get to. I hadn't seen any other boats, no other signs of anyone for miles. And why would they be sitting way up there so incredibly still for so long? I'd been on the pier for a couple of hours by this point. They must have been there before I even arrived. "Hey!" I shouted up, cupping my hands around my mouth, my voice whipped away almost instantly by the strong wind. "Hello up there? You alright?" No response. No movement at all from the silhouette. Nothing. I got out my powerful zoom lens from my main camera, the one I use for capturing distant details or wildlife. Focused it carefully on that top gondola. Even with the zoom cranked all the way, the figure was still mostly just a dark shape against the brighter sky. But I could definitely make out a head, shoulders. It certainly looked human-shaped, and it was facing directly out to sea, away from me, away from the land. Still, utterly, unnervingly still. Was it a mannequin? Some kind of weird art installation left up there by previous visitors or local kids trying to be edgy. That seemed plausible. Incredibly creepy, but plausible. "Okay, folks," I said to my vlogging camera, trying to show the zoomed-in view on its little flip screen. "Either we have a very, very dedicated statue enthusiast up there, some kind of modern-day simian stylites, or there's a mannequin enjoying the best, if somewhat rusty, view on the entire pier, or someone is being incredibly patient and possibly not quite right in the head." I kept filming other parts of the pier as dusk began to settle in earnest, but my eyes and my camera kept getting drawn back up to that top gondola. The silhouette never moved, not an inch. As the light faded further, it became harder and harder to see clearly. The wind picked up even more, whistling eerily through the rusted framework of the giant wheel, making all the empty gondolas groan and sway more noticeably. All except the top one. That one. The one with the silent figure. Seemed almost unnaturally still, as if it was weighted down or resisting the wind. I decided to set up my night vision camera on a small, sturdy tripod I'd brought, aimed directly at the top of a Ferris wheel. Maybe if it was a real person, they'd move after full dark. Or maybe the night vision would pick up details I couldn't see now. I found a relatively sheltered spot in what used to be a little donut shack. Its roof mostly gone, but the walls still offering some protection from the wind. Set up the camera securely, made sure it was recording, and then I continued exploring other, less exposed parts of the pier by flashlight, always conscious of the massive, silent wheel looming nearby and its solitary, watchful occupant. Around 10 p.m., I went back to check on the night vision camera. The wind was absolutely howling now, a full gale, and the pier was groaning and creaking under the stress, like an old ship about to break apart in a storm. The footage on the camera showed not much at first, just the grainy, green-hued image of the top gondola, swaying a bit more in the stronger wind now. The silhouette was still there, still motionless, still facing out to sea. But then, as I was watching the playback scrubbing through it, I saw it. A tiny, almost imperceptible pinprick of light from inside the gondola with the silhouette. Like the brief, shielded flare of a cigarette lighter, or maybe someone quickly checking a phone screen. It was there for literally a second, then gone. My heart did a serious jump. That was not a mannequin. Mannequins don't light cigarettes or check their phones in the middle of a gale on top of a derelict Ferris wheel. Someone was up there, alive, sitting in that gondola, in the pitch dark, in this howling wind, on this crumbling pier, miles from shore. Why? What in the world were they doing? And why hadn't they responded when I shouted earlier? Suddenly, the wind didn't feel like the only thing making the pier groan. The whole situation felt incredibly menacing. Were they watching me? Had they been watching me all along from up there? Was that tiny pinprick of light them checking to see if I was still around, still filming? The crime horror thought, the one about people using remote, forgotten places for bad reasons, surfaced with a vengeance. Were they a lookout? For what? A boat coming in under the cover of the storm? Or were they just dangerously unhinged? I thought about trying to climb the Ferris wheel, just for a fleeting, insane second. Then reality and self-preservation kicked in hard. Rusty, 30-year-old structure, 60-foot drop to jagged rocks or an angry, churning sea, high winds, pitch darkness? No. Thank you. Besides, what if they weren't friendly? What if they didn't want to be found or filmed? Their silence, their stillness, felt less like peaceful contemplation and more like predatory patience. The resolution was simple, if deeply unsatisfying. I couldn't stay. The pier was too exposed, the situation too weird, too potentially dangerous. If that person decided to come down, I was trapped out here. My inflatable kayak was my only way off this godforsaken pier. Packing up my main camera gear quickly, I left the night vision camera still running on the tripod, still pointed up at the Ferris wheel. Maybe it would capture something else. I made my way back to the service ladder, carefully, my flashlight beam darting around nervously. Launched my kayak into the choppy dark water and started paddling like mad back towards the distant, faint lights of the mainland. Every so often, I'd risk a glance back at the Seaview Fun Pier. The Ferris wheel was a dark, skeletal shape against the stormy night sky. No lights from the top gondola now, just darkness. The next morning, I called the local non-emergency police line. Told them, a bit vaguely, that I'd been near the old pier and thought I saw someone on the Ferris wheel. Maybe a stranded trespasser or someone in distress who needed help. They sounded skeptical, said they'd check it out when they had a boat in the area if conditions allowed, but didn't seem too concerned. I guess weirdo on a derelict Ferris wheel isn't exactly high on their priority list. I went back about a week later, during the day, with a friend this time, using his small fishing boat, ostensibly to retrieve my night vision camera, but mostly I just had to know. The pier looked just as derelict in the daylight. The Ferris wheel stood silent. We carefully climbed up, found my camera. It had run out of battery sometime during that stormy night, of course. And the top gondola, it was empty, completely empty. No sign anyone had been there. No cigarette butts, no phone, no discarded clothing, nothing. Just a rusty, swaying metal cage. Had I imagined the light? Was the silhouette just a trick of the fading daylight and my own expectation? some weirdly shaped piece of debris stuck in the seat. The footage from the night vision camera, when I reviewed it later, showed nothing conclusive after that one faint pinprick of light I'd seen on the playback screen that night. Just the empty, swaying gondola until the battery gave out. But I know what I saw, or at least I think I know. Someone was up there. The not knowing who or why or what happened to them, that's the lingering chill that stays with me. It makes that old Ferris wheel feel less like a forgotten ride and more like a silent, lonely watchtower. Its highest seat perhaps still occasionally occupied by someone who prefers the company of the wind and the sea. Someone who watches the world from above and who really doesn't want to be disturbed. It makes you wonder what other lonely sentinels are out there, keeping their silent vigil in forgotten places, out of sight, and what they might be watching for. You hear stories in the urbex community, sometimes just whispers online or scribbled notes in old explorer logs, about certain spots inside forgotten places, things other explorers found that were just off. Not necessarily ghosts, but signs of something weird, something secret. The Tunnel of Love at the long-defunct lakeside Funland was one of those whispered about spots. Supposedly, someone had been leaving these really bizarre, almost ritualistic-looking symbols deep inside its dark, watery passages. For my channel, Forgotten Playgrounds, that sounded like a creepy mystery too good to pass up. Chasing down those symbols, though, led me to something a lot more immediate and a lot more unsettling than just old graffiti. Lakeside Funland was one of those smaller family-owned parks, nestled by a man-made lake that had long since turned into a swampy, overgrown marsh. It had been closed down for maybe 20 years after the lake started to silt up and the crowds dwindled. Getting in was surprisingly easy. The back fence was mostly just a memory, tangled in weeds and fallen branches. I went on a humid, sticky summer afternoon, the air thick with the buzz of insects and the smell of stagnant water. Most of the park was overgrown. Rides like the Kraken's Revenge and Teacup Twirl were tangled in vines, game stalls collapsing under their own weight. I was filming, getting the usual shots of nature slowly, inexorably reclaiming man-made fun from my viewers. Then I found it, tucked away in a far corner of the park, mostly hidden by a thicket of overgrown willow trees, whose branches drooped down to the ground, creating a natural curtain, the Tunnel of Love. The entrance was shaped like a massive, faded pink heart, its paint peeling badly, with a dark, water-filled tunnel disappearing into the gloomy unknown beyond where the little swan-shaped boats used to glide. The water inside looked black, stagnant, probably only a foot or two deep now, choked with leaves, algae, and who knows what other slimy debris. A sign still hung quickly above the heart, barely legible. Share a kiss. Make a wish. Yeah, right. Looked more like share a tetanus shot? Wish you hadn't entered? Alright, folks, I said to my camera, trying to sound a bit more confident than I actually felt. This is the legendary, or perhaps infamous, Tunnel of Love at Lakeside Funland. Rumor has it there's some seriously weird stuff deep inside. Let's see if the legends are true. I had on my heavy-duty waterproof boots and a powerful headlamp, so I figured, why not? What's the worst that could happen in a shallow, watery tunnel, right? Stepping into the shallow, murky water at the tunnel entrance sent an involuntary shiver up my spine despite the humid heat. The smell was rank, stagnant water, decaying leaves, thick mildew, and a faint undertone of something metallic like rust from the old boat track. My headlamp cut a sharp, bright beam into the darkness. The tunnel was concrete, curved, maybe 100 yards long in total, quickly disappearing around a sharp bend. The old track for the boats was still visible, just under the surface of the black water. Faded, incredibly cheesy romantic murals of swans, hearts, and vaguely uncomfortable-looking couples still adorned the damp, slimy walls in places, now looking grotesque and water-stained in the harsh light of my headlamp. I waded slowly deeper into the tunnel, camera rolling, narrating the creepy atmosphere for my viewers. The only sounds were the squelch and suck of my boots in the muddy bottom, the constant drip of water from somewhere in the arched ceiling, and my own breathing, which suddenly sounded way too loud in the confined space. About halfway in, as I rounded the first significant bend, the natural light from the entrance completely vanished. It was just me and my headlamp beam in the oppressive, silent darkness. Utter blackness beyond the reach of my light. That's when I started seeing them. The symbols, the ones from the online rumors. Not the usual faded tags or teenage scribbles you see in these derelict places. This was different. Strange symbols, almost runic looking, or like some kind of bizarre, spidery algebra painted in what looked like stark white. Surprisingly fresh paint. They stood out sharply against the dark, damp concrete walls. They were spaced out, appearing every 10 feet or so as I waded further. And in between them, crudely painted white arrows, all pointing deeper into the tunnel. What was this? Some kind of weird urbex trail marker system I didn't know about. Or something else entirely. The symbols didn't look friendly at all. They had a spiky, almost aggressive feel to them. Okay, this is definitely new, I whispered to the camera, panning across one of the larger symbols. This graffiti, it doesn't look like typical vandalism from when the park was open. This looks more recent and more purposeful, like directions or maybe warnings. The crime horror part of my brain. The one that's always looking for the unsettling human angle in these forgotten places started to hum a little louder. Was someone or some group using this long disused hidden tunnel for something they didn't want found? Further in, the air grew colder, the silence more intense, more absolute. Then I found something else. A small low alcove carved into the tunnel wall, maybe originally meant for some cheesy animatronic cupid or a twinkling light effect. Now, it held a small, recently extinguished campfire. Just a circle of blackened stones, some still warm charred wood, and a pile of fresh-looking cigarette butts. A modern brand. And next to it, a couple of empty beer cans, also modern, and a discarded, cheap-looking disposable lighter. Someone had been here very, very recently, using this deep, dark, forgotten tunnel of love as a hangout. Or maybe a hideout? Those strange symbols on the wall, the arrows. Were they leading to this spot, or from it? It felt less like a place for a romantic boat ride and more like a clandestine meeting spot, a hidden den. Suddenly, the tunnel didn't feel just abandoned anymore. It felt actively occupied. And whoever was using it, if they were still around, probably wouldn't appreciate an urbex vlogger with a camera and a bright headlamp stumbling upon their secret spot. I swept my light around nervously. The tunnel continued on, deeper into the darkness. The arrows, the unsettling symbols, they kept going. How far did this thing run? And what was at the end? I think, I said to the camera, my voice very low now, trying to keep it steady, that maybe we've seen enough of a tunnel of love for today. This feels a little less than romantic right now. More like we've overstayed our welcome at someone else's private party. I started to turn back to head for the distant, faint glimmer of daylight that marked the entrance. And then I heard it. From deeper in the tunnel, beyond where my light reached, from around the next dark bend. A sound. A soft scrape. Like something heavy, maybe a box or a bag, being dragged across the concrete floor. followed by a muffled thump, as if it was set down. I froze solid, every nerve ending on high alert. That wasn't an animal. That wasn't the building settling. That was a human sound, deliberate, and it was coming from further inside. Were they still here? Had they heard me talking to my camera? Silence returned. I stood there, heart pounding like a jackhammer, water up to my ankles, listening. Did I imagine it? Was it just echoes from my own movements, distorted by the tunnel acoustics? The tunnel was a perfect echo chamber, after all. Then another sound, fainter this time, but absolutely unmistakable. A low murmur of voices, at least two people. Too indistinct to make out any words, too garbled by the distance and the tunnel's shape. But definitely voices. Human voices. Coming from around the next bend in the tunnel. Okay, nope, absolutely not. Whoever was in there, whatever they were doing, I wanted no part of it. The near-miss alarm was blaring in my head at full volume now. This was the point where the smart urbexer, the one who wants to live to explore another day, retreats quickly and quietly. I turned and started wading back towards the entrance as fast as I possibly could without splashing too much and making a ton of noise. Every step felt like it took an eternity. I kept expecting to hear those voices get louder, to see a light appear from around the bend behind me, to hear footsteps splashing through the water after me. My back was crawling with that awful exposed feeling. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime of terrified waiting, I saw the faint, blessed glimmer of daylight from the tunnel entrance. Relief washed over me, so strong it almost made my knees buckle. I splashed out of the tunnel, back into the humid summer air, blinking in the sudden brightness. Didn't stop. Just kept moving, back through the overgrown, decaying park, towards the gap in the fence I'd used to get in. Getting out of the park, putting distance between me and that dark, unsettling tunnel, was the escape. The immediate threat, the unknown occupants, were behind me. That was the resolution. But the questions, man, they linger. Who was using that old tunnel of love? What were they doing deep inside there, in the dark? Were the symbols a warning? Some kind of gang sign? Directions to something even more hidden? And those sounds, what were they dragging? What were they talking about? The thought of stumbling into some clandestine meeting, some illicit activity, in a place like that, it's a specific kind of fear that really sticks with you. It's not about ghosts. It's about the very real, very unpredictable dangers of what other humans might be up to in these forgotten, lawless spaces. The tunnel of love, yeah, right. More like the tunnel of get the hell out before they find you and make you part of their secrets. It makes you think twice about what darkness these old rides are really hiding in their decaying, waterlogged hearts, and what kind of wishes are being made in there now.